Blessington and Michael Nania. Well, Michael, the 2023 NFL Draft has wrapped. The New York Jets have made all 7 of their selections. A few trade downs on day 3, so they ended up with a few more picks than they were originally expected to have. We didn't have a podcast last night. Our apologies on that, but obviously a terrific pick in round 2. So we're going to break it all down, talk about the draft as a whole, break some of these guys down, and then tomorrow we'll be doing a mailbag. So we'll put out a tweet, but make sure to tweet us some mailbag questions, and we'll be answering those, and that podcast will be coming out on Monday. So with that said, Michael, how do you feel after the draft is closed? I know night one there was some panic on Jets Twitter because they took an edge and they had the hole on the offensive line. JD aggressively attacked it and added some athletic freaks in the process. So how do you feel as we sit here on Saturday night?
I think I feel pretty good about it. I think for the most part, there were a lot of really good trends that you saw with the picks that they made throughout all 7 rounds of the draft. And you brought up some of these while we were talking about it prior to recording this. But I think you saw consistently the Jets targeted length, athleticism, good character guys, which have all been traits that the Jets have valued throughout Joe Douglas's tenure. But it really feels like that they stuck to their board and took the prospects they liked the best. And along the way, they were able to fill some needs while doing that. Getting Joe Tippmann in the 2nd round was a big time pick. Really like that one. Maybe my favorite pick of the entire class. Then they were able to snag a tackle in the 4th round with Carter Warren. So they were able to get that offensive line help that people wanted. Running back, I think, was an underrated need. They addressed that. So they plugged some holes along the way. They also attacked some positions that weren't necessarily prime needs, obviously, most notably with the edge rusher in the 1st round, Will McDonald. But I think the draft is always just about getting the best player available and sticking to your board, because in the long run, it's so unlikely that each one of these picks pan out that you just want to maximize your odds of succeeding with each one of them. And we talk about it every single time we record this now. You don't want to have a grocery shopping list in the draft, and we sort of prepared ourselves for it, but we weren't completely bought into that idea. We should have been more open to them taking edge, defensive tackle, anything in that 1st round, but we still kind of were all fixated on the offensive tackle, and they didn't end up going there. So I think people were taken aback by it, especially because McDonald himself wasn't really considered to be in that top half of the 1st round sort of mix. But once the dust settled on that and a lot of people got to watch his film and research him throughout that next day prior to the 2nd and 3rd rounds of the draft, I think we all got to see what the Jets' vision is with him, that he is a player who has legitimate, not to say he will be this, but his ceiling is that superstar level kind of edge because of the length and the bend. He has those traits that allow you to become a guy who gets a lot of sacks, a lot of strip sacks, that household name type of player. So overall, I like the draft, but as with any class, you have to wait and see how it pans out. But I think the process here was sound, and I like the trade downs they made here in the 3rd day. A couple of those, just get some more throws at the dartboard, because they only had 5 picks total. So to get a couple extra picks, get it up to 7, is a much more reasonable number. And I think it's on day 3 of the draft, if you have to drop 20, 30 spots in the 6th round to get another pick, I think that's usually worthwhile if you're a team in the Jets position. So overall, I like the thought process of this draft, and we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it like this. The Jets finally have an identity. For so long when drafting it, it just felt like they were rudderless, that they didn't have a plan, and I didn't particularly trust the scouting departments. And look, it's not like Joe Douglas has been perfect, but I think especially in the last 3 drafts, Joe Douglas's first draft, it's with Adam Gase, and it was the COVID draft, so it wasn't necessarily the full process. And his second draft with Robert Saleh, I know a lot of people are going to criticize the Zach Wilson pick. However, I would say a lot of Jets fans and most NFL analysts were on board with that pick. So as much as he does deserve to be criticized for that pick, it's not like he went with an out of the box against the grain selection with Zach Wilson on that one. I think you touched on the point of the Jets really having key characteristics that they've looked for in their draft picks. And yeah, length definitely stood out to me. I mean, they really like their guys with long arms. You look at the relative athletic scores on every guy they drafted this year, and it's off the charts. They look for high character guys. team captains, and so they have an identity. And over the last three draft classes, you can see a certain theme. They're also matching the coaching staff to the front office, which I think is another problem that the Jets struggled with previous regimes. It's very clear that the Jets are drafting guys to fit Robert Saleh's defense and to fit Nathaniel Hackett's offense. And that's a good sign. And I think you've seen it work out the last two drafts. They've had some hits. It's all about, I think the guys they take on day 2 and day 3, you want to see the guys in the 2021 class and the 2022 class continue to take the next step. But overall, with this class, I really like the depth that they added, especially on the second and third day. They really solidified the trenches and the depth there, and they added some athletic freaks in the process. And like I said, they have an identity. The New York, when you say New York Jets football, something comes to mind, and that team is bigger than you, it's faster than you, it's longer than you, and the Jets are going to win a lot of games this year because of that. And I really like the idea of, especially on day 3, and you look at some of the guys that they took. I like the idea of taking some big swings. Go after the high ceiling guys, the guys who have elite level traits that need to be coached up. Put some faith in your coaching staff. And I really like some of the offensive players they took today. But let's just start with Joe Tippmann. Let's go chronologically. We'll run through all these guys, get your feedback on it, and then we'll take a look at the draft as a whole, talk about some of the questions that come up now that the Jets roster has been pretty much built for 2023. I would imagine they might add some veterans, and the undrafted free agent signings will keep pouring in, and maybe they'll make a trade. But for the most part, we have an idea of what the 2023 Jets will look like, and it's certainly exciting. So, Michael, I'll start with Joe Tippmann. I think he was one of the guys we were hoping would fall to 43. He was one of the guys we had talked about. I think the thing that stands out to me here is whether or not it's true that the Jets were going to take Broderick Jones and got screwed by the Patriots. The one thing we've heard consistently about Joe Douglas is he's measured. He doesn't waver. He doesn't panic. And I think that what you saw from taking Will McDonald and then taking Joe Tippmann was Joe Douglas pivoting to a plan B. He didn't panic. They took the best guy on their board in round 1, and then they took the top center in my mind in round 2. And yes, they could have maybe like the trade down with Green Bay maybe affected them getting Broderick Jones. But when you look at this, like you said, they took a guy McDonald that has elite traits, and for years, and even with Jermaine Johnson, for years I've heard Jets fans complain about the Jets not taking a pass rusher. And yes, Jermaine Johnson is a first-round pass rusher. I still like his ceiling. But the type of player that Will McDonald is, the type of athlete that Will McDonald is, and the bend that he's going to bring to this team, and the pass rushing capability he's going to bring to this team is not something the Jets have ever drafted since I've been watching them. So you go ahead and you take a guy you believe in, the best player available on your board, which goes against the grain. I heard some people talk about, I saw it on Twitter that it was a panic pick. It's like, no, a panic pick would just be taking the top guy on the consensus big board or trading down for pennies. They took a guy that was against the grain, which means they believed in him. And then they turn around and they go ahead and they take the top center, and it leaves you with questions about what the Jets starting 5 the Jets will put out there on the offensive line. But between him and we'll get to who they took on day 3, I really like the depth that the Jets have on the offensive line. Bringing back Connor McGovern earlier last week for about $2 million is terrific as well. The Jets' offensive line can survive injuries. They can make it through December. They want to win on the ground. They need to protect their 39-year-old quarterback. So I really love the addition of Joe Tippmann. Michael, we've had a day to look into him. What are you seeing from Joe Tippmann? Is he the next in the line of great New York Jets centers behind Kevin Moy and Nick Mangold?
I think he does have a chance to be that. It's like I said earlier, I think it's my favorite pick of this class just based on what I've seen from watching him so far. He's the guy who I feel the most confident in him becoming a good NFL starter because I watched a couple games of him and the consistency just from the very beginning was very evident. From down to down, he's just so consistent in both phases. I think in pass protection, good awareness. He was picking up stunts and blitzes, which is maybe the main thing I want to see from whoever. Hopefully, it's him who replaces Connor McGovern, because again, McGovern has good traits. We've talked about it, especially in the run game, but just a lot of havoc up the middle in pass protection the past couple years, and not necessarily one-on-one stuff with McGovern. It's a lot of the pickups and things like that. So I think that's something Tippmann is good with. And then in the run game, I think you look at his highlights, the Jets have posted some, a lot of people have posted them. a lot of it is pulling. He's a great puller, and that's great because the Jets do run those pulls occasionally. Like they got AVT in a lot of those last year, and he was very effective on pin and pulls, a lot of that power gap stuff inside. So it's great that he can do that in addition to the zone sort of concepts because, as we know, the Jets are an outside zone team, and that wasn't Wisconsin didn't do a lot of that. If you look at Tippmann's film, but when they did, you could see that he fits that as well. He gets off the ball. He has good lateral quickness. So I mean, he's a really good prospect. Centers just don't get drafted that highly in the NFL typically, unless you have even last year when you had a guy like Linderbaum, who's considered one of the best center prospects in recent years. Even he goes in the 20s, and he was like as good as it gets for a center. So teams just don't draft them that highly.
Which
That's
is
why I
strange
think,
because they are
yeah,
valuable. Like,
I don't really get it because like as Jets fans, we've watched a lot of bad center play since Nick Mangold retired, and prior to that, we saw two amazing centers, or at least I wasn't watching it when Mawai was playing, but Jets fans as a whole, between Mangold and him and Kevin Mawai, have seen great center play. We know the value of that, and with the poor centers we've seen since Nick Mangold, we know what it looks like when the center is not playing well. So I think it's an undervalued position in the NFL. But yeah, I think that's the only reason Tippmann's here in the second round. But as far as center prospects go, I think he's pretty sharp. He's definitely high up there. So I feel good about him winning that job and being a good starter from day one.
yeah, I honestly don't get why center is undervalued in the NFL draft because, like you said, we've seen what a dominant center does for an offensive line and especially a run game. Having that dominant force up front. I mean, just look at it from the inverse perspective. You know what a dominant defensive tackle can do. It can wreak havoc on an offense. If you have somebody who can counter that, you know, through the air or on the ground, it's a fantastic benefit for an offense. And on the flip side, if you have somebody who's constantly getting bowled over or missing assignments and guys are flying up the A gap like the Jets have seen the last few years, you can see how much it can wreck an offense. How many horrible second and long, third and long situations have the Jets been in because they have these crazy negative plays just from bad center play. So it is a tremendously valuable position. I love the size. I love that the Jets have a lot of bullies up front. I mean, Joe Douglas has a lot of nasty on this offensive line between him, between Becton. Let's see what Lakin can get back to. But 49ers, Lakin had a lot of nastiness. AVT, I mean, bodies are going to be hitting the floor this year. So I think, I go to Syracuse, so somebody had asked me, are you mad the Jets didn't get Matthew Bergeron, who's the tackle from Syracuse? And I was like, no, I mean, I'd rather have the number one center than the fifth best tackle. And this pick had me pumped. I think it quelled a lot of the concerns after night one about not addressing the offensive line. The thing that really stands out to me, and I think I was a little quick to assume that AVT would jump to right tackle. As soon as it happened, I was like, all right, AVT to right tackle it is. And then I thought about it as like, well, I mean, Connor McGovern's only getting paid $2 million. Dwayne Brown's getting paid $11 million. He did play on a torn rotator cuff last season. We know the veteran leadership that he has. I would imagine that the Jets value him quite highly. So maybe Dwayne Brown is the starting left tackle, and maybe Becton is going to right tackle. Becton seemingly has voiced his desire to stay on the left side, which is part of why I like the idea of having him be the left tackle. Dwayne Brown can be the veteran leader, depth option, and then on the right side, you were hoping to get a rookie. Nowadays, I would have said AVT. A lot of Jets fans are thinking maybe Max Mitchell. He certainly flashed last year. I think his health situation was a bit of a question mark, but he was out there at the hockey game, and the Jets have talked him up this offseason. So maybe Max Mitchell is their plan. And then obviously they did draft another tackle on day 3. How do you see this offensive line playing out? What do you think the best combination is? Because the thing that really stands out to me about Tippmann is because he has that ability to pull and that athleticism and that mobility, they can leave a guy like Dwayne Brown at left tackle. Because I think the thing that concerns me about Brown is he doesn't have the athleticism of a younger tackle. And in this outside zone system, when you're trying to get outside and create that angle, a lot of times you want to have a big mammoth left tackle like Trent Williams getting downfield and blocking. Not saying Dwayne Brown can't do that. He still can, but having an athletic center who can pull allows you to keep Dwayne Brown, blocking the backside of the play and it gives you a lot more options in terms of this outside zone offense. So that was a long-winded way of asking you, how do you see the Jets utilizing their starting five?
Yeah, I think there's going to be plenty of competition starting with that center spot. I think ultimately Tippmann will win it, but I do think they brought back McGovern with the idea that he'd compete for that role because they did already have Tristan Colon and Wes Schweitzer, who actually got more guaranteed money than McGovern did. So I don't think those guys were brought in with the idea of starting or competing to start. I think McGovern was more brought in for that just because of his experience already starting with this team and with these guys. So I think there will be that token competition, but unless Tippmann is a complete, really struggling out of the gate, I think he'll win that job. But the tackle spots are interesting. I do think AVT is going to stay a guard. That versatility is great to have for a rainy day, but I think their primary plan is going to be to have him playing guard just because Salah talked about it at the league meetings and even in the interviews today when they drafted Tippmann when they were talking about it, they spoke about having AVT and Lakin next to him at center. So I think that's their plan and they're going to stick with that. But uh, I think regarding the tackles, it's a good idea to start talking about the next pick the Jets made, Carter Warren in the fourth round, because I watched some of him and I was impressed with him as well. I think he's a guy who his length really stands out. I thought in pass protection, he looked really polished in his pass sets, just the way he gets into his stance, gets into his kick slide. He really looks like a professional tackle. I think he slid because he's going to be 24 this year. He had a season-ending knee injury last year, and he was in college for 6 years. So obviously, the age he's coming off the injury. But they're talking about on NFL Network when he got drafted that they saw him as a second or third round pick if he came out last year. But he went back, tried to improve first round stock, had the knee injury, couldn't do the combine, and obviously had limited tape last year. So then he just fell further. But this is a guy who you watch him and you could see a professional starting tackle when you look at him, just with the build and some of his polish and pass protection. So I really think he'll be in that mix to start. The Jets have question marks with injuries with Becton, with Dwayne Brown, even Mitchell in terms of health and all that. So I think Warren could be in that mix. I could we see two competitions at tackle? Maybe left tackle we get Warren versus Dwayne Brown, right tackle Mitchell versus Becton, or maybe it's just well, I think Dwayne Brown's the only guy who will be pigeonholed to a position at left tackle. But other than that, maybe they let the other three guys play both sides and just they all duke it out, see who shines. I mean, I think Becton is if as long as he's healthy, I think he's going to start unless he is just really struggling. But I think those two young guys are going to be in the mix, Mitchell and Warren, because they drafted them fourth round pick for Warren. Mitchell's fourth round too, right? So not the
Yeah.
lowest picks in the world. I think they are hoping that one of those guys can be a starter. I think that's a good realistic goal. If one of those two can be a starter this year, beat out Dwayne Brown, and just look like a hit in the mid rounds, I think that's what they're hoping to get. Just one of those two guys. So it will be interesting because Dwayne Brown gives you the experience and just veteran reliability, but he has plenty of durability concerns himself. He's not getting any better or any more durable at this stage of his career. And I think you can improve on him quite a bit, especially in the run game. In pass pro, he could be decent, I think, in that phase of the game, but the run game last year really struggled and you talked about it as well, but you're not really getting that athleticism and that lateral mobility that you want in this outside zone scheme with Dwayne Brown. And I don't even think they brought him in because he was a scheme fit. It was just last second they were in such a dire situation at tackle. He was the best guy available, so they just brought him in. I don't really think he's the best scheme fit in the run game, so I think they're going to hope one of those two young guys, whether it's Warren as a rookie or Mitchell in a second year leap, can prove worthy of taking one of these starting jobs. So it's going to be very interesting to see. It's just good to have so many worthy bodies in there who can compete and just have all these guys duke it out and see who rises to the top.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Douglas certainly solidified the trenches on both sides in this draft, and I think with Tippmann and Warren, the depth on this offensive line It's a pick for the future and hoping these guys can develop, but we've seen every single year offensive linemen go down. How many different combinations do teams have to play throughout the season? So to have this many guys and guys who can play different positions, Becton can play different positions. AVT has proven he can play multiple positions. Connor McGovern can play multiple positions. You have a lot of guys who are versatile. You have young guys with high ceilings, and you have some veteran options as well. So I think Joe Douglas did a really good job pivoting from probably what was plan A, which was hoping to get one of those tackles with the 15th overall pick. I like that he stayed calm and was able to pivot to this plan. And just thinking about the ceiling of this Jets run offense, yes, it's exciting to think about what a Hall of Fame quarterback will be like to watch. But I think about that the change that the Jets have made with their scheme, bringing in Keith Carter. You know, you saw what he did in Tennessee with Derrick Henry. You look at this offensive line the Jets are constructing. There are some question marks, but if you know, this is a lot of ifs, but I wouldn't say they're out of the realm of possibility. Can Lakin get back to San Francisco Lakin? Can Mekhi Becton return to rookie year Mekhi Becton? Can Elijah Vera Tucker stay healthy? You know, can Joe Tippmann at center uh, come in day one and start? I certainly think he can. I think the other thing that stands out when you watch him that we didn't really touch on is how smart of a player it is. I think his football IQ, you saw he was setting protections a lot of the time at Wisconsin. You hear him talk about himself at the combine interview. He's a guy that knows when he gets up in front of teams at a whiteboard, he's going to impress them. So, you know, I do think he's a guy who can come in day one and start. And then, yeah, what's that other tackle spot? But then you think about the receivers, and we know how important receiver blocking is in an outside zone system. If you want big home run plays down the sideline, outside, on the perimeter, you need good receiver blocking. And the Jets have two of the best run blocking receivers, I would say, in the NFL, in Allen Lazard and Corey Davis. And then you look at the tight ends. I know they weren't as involved last year as they maybe could have been between CJ Uzama and Tyler Conklin, but I would have to imagine that Rodgers is going to utilize them in the pass game. And then as blockers, they were fairly effective. We'll see what Jeremy Recker could bring. I thought he looked good week 18, but we didn't see too much of him. And then that brings me to running back, which Brees Hall was a phenom last year, but we know it could take running backs some time to come back from the ACL. He's a similar player to Saquon Barkley, and Barkley took a whole year before he was back to the Saquon Barkley of old. It sounds like Brees is doing well in his recovery, so I hope that he's ready to roll week one and it is back to breaking tackles and making big plays. And then to turn around in the 5th round and land Israel Abanikanda. And last night, I wish we had done a podcast. I was looking at, okay, who are the players the Jets can draft? We know day 3, especially you're not looking at needs. You're going best player available. This is the day the scouts shine. You think about, yes, long-term potential. You think about positions you want to have pipelines in. You think about taking guys with high ceilings. I love the idea of taking a running back in the draft on day 3 every year. Trent Baalke does it. And I think it's a smart approach. You just get a young athlete. There are plenty of good running backs every single year. They all fall, and you can land a starter in round 5. San Francisco does it all the time. They draft some no-name on day 3, and by November he's starting, and everybody's adding him to their fantasy team. And Israel Abanikanda is an absolute home run hitter. I think he allows the Jets to ease Brees Hall back. They also have Michael Carter and Zonovan Knight. But to add a guy that anytime he touches the football, he can score with track speed. He has an insane second burst once he gets past the line of scrimmage. You'll see it a lot. But he's a perfect fit for this offense because he can make that cut, hit that second burst, and hit that extra gear that he has, and he can run away from guys. He has to work on some things. You know, his vision behind the line of scrimmage could use some work. He doesn't break as many tackles, but speed kills. And I absolutely love this pick. I think this is an exciting pick. I think this is a guy who's going to be scoring touchdowns for the Jets this year that people will be adding to their fantasy teams. I love that they can run 2 back sets with him and Brees. He'll be able to be a nice change of pace for Brees, and the Jets can firmly establish themselves as a ground and pound team that, yes, has a Hall of Fame quarterback, but a ground and pound team, regardless if Brees Hall gets injured. I absolutely love this pick. I think this was the pick that had me the most excited today. What about you?
Yeah, I love picking running backs on the 3rd day of the draft. It's just a good idea to keep, refreshing that position because we know how running backs career arcs work in the NFL. They kind of start at their peak and they go downward from that point because it's just a position where as the mileage gets tacked on and piles up in the league, you kind of get worse and worse. And we know running backs kind of have the shortest shelf life in the league, maybe the earliest peak and the earliest decline. So because of that, it's good to just keep refreshing it, get cheap guys who could just plug in and get them for the heart of their prime and then just keep that cycle going. So I always like the philosophy of running back picks. And then looking at Abanikanda in particular, and regarding the name, I feel like it's easy to say, but I still have to kind of look at it to remember what it is. So it's going to take some time to get used to
I'm
it.
just glad. I'm just glad they didn't get the defensive tackle from Northwestern. I know on the board he might have been the guy you wanted to fall in the fourth round, but I don't know if I was going to make it through the podcast.
That's true. But yeah, I think it's from a player perspective, the home run hitting, they already have a guy who could do that in Brees, although we have to see how that gets maintained as he recovers from his injury. But um, if Brees Hall isn't back to his typical self, I think that home run hitting ability would be a need because other running backs they have aren't necessarily great in that department. We know Michael Carter's not really a home run hitting breakaway speed kind of guy. Zonovan Knight can be, although when we saw him last year, it wasn't a huge fixture of his game. So I think to have Abanikanda in there and throwing his home run hitting speed into the mix is a good thing to have. I think in terms of why he's available or was available in the fifth round, I was looking into a little bit. Seems like his pass blocking sort of an issue. He didn't have a ton of passing game impact. You mentioned vision and some of the more nitty gritty things. I think there are some limitations there to where maybe he's not the most complete running back. Maybe he won't develop into like a Brees Hall caliber RB1 who could do it all. Although we've seen bigger surprises develop into that before. So anyone's capable of it. But there are some question marks. There's a reason he was there in the fifth round. But home run hitting speed, Jets are going to need that if Brees Hall can't bring it right off the bat. And you mentioned the 49ers and Raheem Mostert. I think you can get this type of guy with the Abanikanda, just a home run hitter in this
Yeah,
outside zone scheme who gets outside, sees the hole, bang, and just hits it. And maybe
that's
in the long run there'll be some run stuffs in there. He's not the best passing game guy, whatever. But if he's just giving you a couple home runs a season as that complimentary guy, and it's a great thing to have. So good security at running back as you see what Brees Hall does in his recovery. Competition for Michael Carter after a tough year last year, and Zonovan Knight, who showed a lot of promise, but still needs to keep building on that to prove that he can maintain it. So, like the pick a lot.
Yeah, Mostert is exactly who I see when I watch him. And you mentioned Michael Carter having the down year. I mean, I still believe in Michael Carter. I mean, look, he seems like he's a great presence in the locker room. You're never quite sure what injuries guys are battling. But the difference between Michael Carter as a rookie and as a sophomore was pretty drastic. I mean, he wasn't able to break the same amount of tackles. He wasn't as slippery. I felt like his vision behind the line of scrimmage wasn't as strong. But Michael Carter on a good day, the player that Michael Carter was as a rookie, was a guy who can find the holes and can go get 5, 6, 7 yards every play. Abanikanda brings you that, might not give you that, but brings you the home run hitting ability. So I think they complement each other quite well. And also, I was thinking about Michael Carter and the size of this Jets offensive line, having Becton and Tippmann. If you're going to run left with Tippmann pulling and Becton as the lead block, and you got Michael Carter as the running back, I don't think defenses are going to be able to find him at all. So that's going to be pretty cool. Pretty cool to watch. And for the third year in a row, JD putting a priority on getting playmakers. Yes, this is in the fifth round, so maybe it's a stretch to say playmaker. But at the same time, I think going back to the argument of best player available versus needs, running back might not have been the strongest need, but Joe Douglas knows that playmakers win in this league. And you look at like what Isaiah Pacheco did for the Chiefs this past year. You can get a guy on day 3 who runs hard, brings you fresh legs, can be the change of pace back. And as the season gets, goes into December, maybe a guy goes down, or maybe, just the legs aren't as fresh. You can bring somebody like this in. And I think over under 2.5 Pepsi Rookie of the Weeks for Abanikanda.
It depends on Brees, because I think if Brees is good to go, which we hope, then maybe
But
he
if
won't get
but
the
if he gets a
touches.
touchdown, he'll be on the ballot, and Jets fans will push it over the top.
Right, that's a good point. I'll say over. He can get
I think
3.
over 2. I think he gets 3. All right, so then Joe Douglas followed that pickup with Zaire Barnes, a linebacker from Western Michigan. And I'll be honest, I tried to watch all these guys, but the only one that there really isn't a lot of film on, so I won't pretend to know too much about him, is this player. But I will say I trust Robert Saleh when it comes to scouting linebackers. He talks about him flying all around the field, getting after the ball. I listened to his interview. He sounds like a high football IQ player. The Jets obviously are relatively thin at linebacker. We'll see if they bring back Quan. I think they're going to be high on Jamie Sherwood as well. This is entering year 3 for him. This is the year that he should try, be making an impact. Quincy Williams, as well, got the contract extension, but Mosley's getting towards the end of his time here. I think if they make a push with Rodgers and Mosley doesn't decline, I could see him, continuing to restructure his deal and hanging on for a couple more years. But the athleticism isn't maybe what Robert Saleh would desire from the linebacker position. So I like investing in it. Look, Fred Warner is a completely different prospect and was taken in the second round. But, you could take a young linebacker, a rookie linebacker, and if you have in this scheme, athleticism thrives. And I think the Jets took an athlete here. They took somebody that they feel like they can coach up. And hopefully he's not having to play too much as a rookie. Again, we're talking day 3 picks here. A good draft might be 3 good players, 3 starters. So not everybody can be home runs. There isn't a lot on this guy, but I trust Robert Saleh. I trust the scouting department. And from the scouting reports I have read, he sounds like an intriguing player. Have you been able to find a lot on Zaire Barnes?
The only video of him playing I was able to find on YouTube was a video. Apparently, it looks like it was from his mom 11 years ago of him in middle school making a tackle. So, based on that,
Hey,
he
look,
did show really good closing speed and a
okay.
nice finish in space. So, definitely a lot to build on.
Sounds like first ballot Hall of Famer right there. But how do you feel like he fits in and the Jets linebacker position as a whole? Do you think they need to bring back Quan? How do you see him deploying it? Is it Jamie and Sherwood time? From what you've read about Barnes, do you see him as more of a Mike, more of a Sam or a Will? Just your thoughts on the Jets linebacker situation.
I still think Quan is going to come back. It just, at this point, it makes a lot of sense for both sides because to start off free agency, it made sense for Quan to go look for better opportunities, maybe somewhere he could play every down, get a longer term, more lucrative deal, but it didn't come to fruition. And maybe he's still going to hold on and hope for that opportunity to arise. But at this point, I think a return to New York, the Jets would definitely love to have him back. And then from his perspective, if he's not going to find that deal or increased role that he's looking for, then why not come back to a comfortable place where he knows he can fit into the scheme, play well, fit into the locker room, and showcase himself again for free agency next year on another 1 year deal. So I think it makes sense, and the Jets are going to find a way to make that happen. And ultimately, once that does happen, I think you're going to have Barnes and Sherwood and Azraeldine in there competing to be the top backup linebacker and get some special team snaps as well. So I don't see any of these young linebackers having a big role just because I do think Quan is going to come back. But if he doesn't, then I do think it's open season for one of these guys to emerge and take that role that Quan was playing last year as the sub linebacker who was, it's a pretty big role in this defense. He was playing about 40 to 50% of the snaps in games where all 3 linebackers were healthy. So it's an important role. They need a guy who can come out there and play in space, both cover and set the edge against the run. They have their 4-3 base package out there, and I think if Quan doesn't come back, you're going to see all 3 of these young guys have a chance to seize that role.
Yeah, I think the thing that stands out to me when I see him is again the length. I mean, you've heard Robert Saleh talk about when referring to Tremaine Edmonds. Well, now he's in Chicago, but when he was in Buffalo as an avatar, and I think Saleh likes guys who take up a lot of space. In this wide 9 defense, you have to cover a lot of ground, and guys who are long, guys who take up a lot of space. That's what they're looking for. And I think that from what I've read, again, I'm not going to act like I've seen it with my own eyes. He sounds like he fits the all gas, no break mold. Fly to the football. Might need to be coached up. We'll see how his coverage skills are. See what he's like in preseason. But I like the idea of taking a flyer on a young athletic linebacker and adding to the room. And then Joe Douglas circled back to the defense after that, taking Jarek Bernard Converse, a defensive back from LSU, also played Oklahoma State, was announced as a corner, but it looks like he's going to play safety. Saleh said they'll get him to Florham Park and see how he feels. But looking at him, he strikes me as a safety. I mean, this is a guy who, again, brings the length, brings the size and the athleticism. He plays the ball well. He's a great tackler. But I think you can see it in the one-on-one coverage. He can get burned. So I think that the fit at safety, especially considering the Jets' 2 starting safeties, I guess Jordan Whitehead's staying, are box safeties. I would imagine the Jets are high on Tony Adams. They cut Jason Pinnock for him. They've talked him up. He looked good in action last year against Seattle. So I think Tony Adams is going to have a definite shot to start. I think he's probably the favorite at this point, but I like bringing in more talent into the DB room. I like the versatility. Does have coverage ability. You know, if you're a mediocre coverage corner, that might make you an average coverage safety. But I think he plays the ball well in air. I think that's one of the things that I really notice is that I think this is a guy who has the potential to develop into a ball hawk. I think he just has that a good feel for the game, and definitely displays a high IQ. But I just think one-on-one with receivers and man coverage is just not his bread and butter. And I don't think, on third downs when you go to man coverage, I just don't know if he's the guy you want on the outside, backing up Sauce. But at safety, I like the fit and I like the value. What did you think of this pick, Michael? What stands out to you if you've gotten a chance to watch him?
I agree. I think safety is probably what they're thinking here, and we've seen the Jets do that before. Take these guys on the third day of the draft with the idea of switching their position, specifically that 2021 draft. I mean, the two linebackers we just brought up, they were safeties when the Jets drafted them. And I think Michael Carter II was playing some safety as well, if I remember correctly. Him or Eccles, I know one of them maybe wasn't full-time corner that made the move, but bottom line, we've seen the Jets show that confidence in taking an athlete they like and translating them to another position. And I think that could be what they have in mind here because you mentioned some of the strengths and weaknesses. His size is pretty good at 6 feet, around 200 pounds. And then I looked at some of his metrics, and he has really good tackling numbers. He does not miss a lot of tackles, one of the lowest missed tackle rates among all cornerbacks in the nation last year.
It's another
Uh,
reason they like the long arms.
yeah, length definitely helps with that. But the coverage definitely was a weakness. 5 touchdowns given up last year, passer rating over 100. So maybe cornerback isn't where he projects to play, but he does have the size and the tackling skills and good athleticism testing as well to maybe make a good transition to safety. So I don't think he'll be in the mix to start this year, although the lack of depth at safety maybe opens the door. But he could be that developmental kind of transition player.
I mean, they did throw Michael Carter II out there day one, and he was money
Right.
from the get go. So I think with DBs and linebackers, I think in this defense, if you have the athleticism and you show that you have the IQ in training camp, I don't think the Jets are afraid to throw those young guys out there. Obviously, the Jets are in a much different situation this year than 2021. I think Adams is certainly the favorite there. I think most likely for him and Barnes and the next guy we're going to talk about, special teams is the way that they're going to make their mark this year. They might surprise in training camp. Obviously, linebacker and safety aren't the strongest positions on this team. So, like you said, they might have an opportunity. But I think these are two athletes, two good tacklers that you're adding to Brant Boyer's unit. These day three picks, these young day three picks, the year one, year two guys are the backbone of your special teams. And if we're going to talk about a win now team, drafting for win now, it's not these picks. Yes, I think they like their ceiling as long term prospects they can develop, but their win now immediate impact on the Super Bowl contending New York Jets is going to be on special teams, and that's a great thing. Hopefully, we don't have to see any more last second punt returns to finish off a game. The other guy that I think is going to be playing special teams is their last pick of the day, who's just an absolute athletic freak. And Michael, I got to be honest, it's very rare that the Jets take somebody in the seventh round that I've actually watched and I've actually heard of. So I think this might be a sign that Zach Kuntz is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, I think that is how you grade seventh round picks. Have I heard of this guy and does he fill a need? I think Zach Kuntz checks both those boxes, and he's a complete, absolute physical freak. He has ultra rare athletic traits, a unicorn profile, if you will. Needs to work, on his blocking and his route running. And there's some little things, and obviously it's a big up in step in competition from Old Dominion. But you look at the athletic profile of the player, and this is a guy that the Jets believe if they can get their hands on him and they can get him in the building and coach him up, he has an incredibly high ceiling. What did you think of this last pick? I think it was a great way to close out the class, and really, we'll get to the class as a whole in a bit. But I think this last pick really put the stamp on what this class's identity is.
Yeah, I think it's always cool to take these athletic freaks late in the draft, like you said, throw a guy like this into the mix. Now, doesn't guarantee anything's going to work out. We just did this with Jonathan Marshall a couple years ago. He was the relative athletic scorer freak, had all the athleticism, and then didn't amount to anything. So it doesn't guarantee that anything's going to work out. But I mean, if you could hit on, Marshall didn't work out, so if you can hit on one out of two of those guys, that would be stellar. But I just like the mindset of taking a chance on athletes at this point in the draft, because I think if you're lasting into the fifth, sixth, seventh round and you're not a super athlete, then it raises serious questions about why you're still there. Because if you don't have those special traits to be developed and you still couldn't stand out enough to be drafted early, then it's hard to find the appeal of why you should be taken. So I think you want to find those guys who do have the ceiling to where if you can develop them, they have that very high potential. And I think they got a few of these guys on the third day of the draft.
Yeah, and Kuntz in particular is such a freak that if he's polished enough as a receiver, which could be the case, it's possible he sees time as a rookie. I'm not expecting it. Again, I'm he might not make the roster if he really shows up and is uh, getting blown off the line of scrimmage and is he is very high cut, so you'd imagine that guy's going to go for the knees, and so I think that might be a concern about. Yes, the height is great, but for a tight end, it's a brutal position, and can he last? But if this is a guy that makes it through training camp, makes an impression, when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback like Aaron Rodgers who can put the ball anywhere on the field, you have a 6'7" receiver for him in the red zone. I mean, I think that is exciting. Yes, this is a seventh round pick, a seventh round tight end from Old Dominion who probably won't play until 2024. So I shouldn't get too excited about the possibility. But thinking about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets' weapons, he elevates every single one of them, especially the freaks that the Jets have added and the height that the Jets have. Certainly with Allen Lazard, you're going to see it with the chemistry that those two guys have. But a 6'7" tight end with the speed that he has, the hops that he has, the strength that he has. I think this is a guy that could potentially make an impact by the end of his rookie year. Do you think that's crazy?
There's definitely an outside chance, especially I think on special teams, he will have a good chance because a lot of the special teams unit is made up of these exact type of players, late round picks who are good athletes, because you can translate that to special teams. And there's still development and skill on special teams as well. But whenever you have athletic traits, it could translate straight to special teams right away. It's more smoothly than offense or defense. So I think on special teams, he'll have the potential to get in there. And we'll see what happens with the tight end room, because we have high hopes for Ruckert. Drafted him in the third round last year, had a great season finale as a blocker, but he did struggle to get on the field the whole season, and that could be mismanagement on the Jets' part. It also could be the fact that he didn't impress them enough to get on the field. So we'll see what happens. But like you said, it's fun to think about the idea of a 6'7" guy with a 40-inch vertical
Jeez.
catching passes in the red zone from Aaron Rodgers, and he ran a 4.55. So with tools like that, it's very exciting to think about what he could be. But at the same time, the guy caught 12 passes last year, so he's got to figure out how to use those tools.
When you look at this class as a whole, what stands out to you?
I think it's just some of those trends that we talked about earlier. There are a lot of common traits between all these guys. The athleticism, I mean, all five of the guys who had a relative athletic score, so excluding Tippmann and Warren because they didn't test enough to get one, but the other five guys all had a relative athletic score that was well over 9. The length is something you see throughout these guys, whether it's McDonald, he's tremendous length, Warren, uh, throughout this class, the length is there. Character, again, is a big thing. We talked about that every year, but team captains, guys who are, don't have off the field questions. As far as I know, there isn't a single one for any of these guys. So those are some of the traits Joe Douglas has valued throughout his tenure with the team, and he really stuck to that in this class. And like you said early in this podcast, it creates an identity for the team. And I think Douglas's ability to know what he's trying to build with his team and what traits make a Jets player has played a big role in allowing him to build the culture that has gotten the Jets to the point where they're at, where they were able to attract an Aaron Rodgers, where they were able to have the draft class they had last year, because they know what their typical player looks like, and they've been identifying that type of player. And I think they did that with this draft class. And another trait with this class that I thought was pretty interesting, they did draft quite a few old guys in this class. Will McDonald, he's going to be 24 this year. Warren's going to be 24. Barnes is going to be 24. So there are some old prospects in here, and
Ew.
and typically you don't view it as ideal to draft prospects who are on the older side. Everyone wants the 20, 21-year-old guy who has all the potential in the world. But I do think there's something to be said for the Jets drafting older prospects in this particular draft, because we know what type of season the Jets are going into. They have Super Bowl aspirations. They're going into a 1 or 2 year window with Aaron Rodgers, or hopefully 2 to 3 years based on what he was saying at his press conference. But we know what the deal is. Short-term window, trying to win now. So older prospects, I think, maybe even if their long-term upside is limited, they do give you a better chance to contribute immediately because they are further along in their physical development. They have more experience. And Michael Clemens showed that last year. He was 25 last year, I think. So, I mean, that's really high. But he showed that being an older prospect can help you get into the league and hit the ground running just because of the advantages that come with it. And in the long term, maybe Clemens won't develop as much as you hope or have as high of a ceiling as you hope because of the age that he came into the league with. We'll see what happens. Maybe he proves that wrong, but that's the downside, I think, with older prospects. But the upside is the ability to come in and maybe have a better chance of contributing right away than a 20 or 21-year-old guy. So with the Jets
Yeah,
wanting to win now, I think it could help to have some of those 24-year-old prospects.
yeah, I think the Jets were drafting in a position they haven't been drafting in since probably 2010, 2011. When you're a win now team, the goalposts shift a little bit. And also the age doesn't bother me as much if they're an athletic freak. If they're an older prospect and they're not an athletic freak and they're, high football IQ, gritty type of prospect, that's where it gives me a little bit more pause. But when you're taking a guy who's 23, 24, but he just jumps off the screen, because that's what I really am getting from this draft class is there haven't been too many guys the Jets have added in draft class pre-Douglas that just popped off the screen when you saw him on the TV. And this one in particular, especially Kuntz, the tight end. I think when you see him on the field, it's going to be jarring if they ever line him up next to Becton on the same line with Tippmann. But yeah, I mean, this entire class is just high ceiling guys with traits that scouts go crazy for. It fits the vision of what Robert Saleh is trying to build and what this new look Jets offense can be. And like I said, they have an identity, and I think they further established that in this draft. I think that was that. I mean, I guess we could talk about it. Joe Douglas is now at 4 drafts as the GM of the New York Jets. We'll be doing a mailbag tomorrow, so we can maybe take some more wider scope questions then. But I guess we can wrap up on this. So now Joe Douglas has had 4 drafts as the GM of the New York Jets, 3 with Robert Saleh. There's been plenty of good picks, some that can be criticized for sure, but there's a very clear plan. There's a methodical approach that gives me a lot of trust. And day 3 of the NFL draft is fun because I trust the scouting department and I see the very clear vision. And I think again, going back, that's the thing the Jets have lacked. It's the plan, the identity, matching the front office to the coaching staff. Um, it's really made all the difference in the world and how these draft classes have felt. We'll see if they're able to translate into wins, but on paper, I really like the Jets' thought process. And so I'll ask you this: we've talked about what that identity of the New York Jets might look like this season, but the roster is taking shape. When you look at the names on the paper, when you watch the film on these guys that they've added, we'll dig into a little bit more tomorrow. But what type of team are you seeing? What is the identity of the New York Jets?
I think it starts in the trenches. That's what Joe Douglas has talked about from day one when he walked in, and I think he's put his money and his draft picks where his mouth is. He started with the first draft, and now you go all the way here to the his 4th draft as general manager, and all three of his first three picks all used on the trenches, pass rush and pass protection, with those first three selections. So I think that's where they want to start. We saw with the Will McDonald pick, maybe we didn't view that as a premium need, but it's just another weapon to an already good pass rush, but it wasn't the best pass rush in the league. But now you throw in McDonald, and hopefully Carl Lawson is healthier than he was last year. You had Quentin Jefferson, who is an upgrade as a pass rusher, and this now has the potential to be the best pass rush in the league, an upgrade over last year when they were very, very good, top five maybe, but I think they want to be the best. And then you look at the O line, they've already put 2 first round picks into it. Now you put a second round pick in there. They spent plenty of free agent money. They've taken multiple mid round shots now, and hopefully one of those guys can break out. There's a lot of investment in that too. And I think with the money, and there's a big free agent signing in Laken Tomlinson, who hopefully can start playing up to that level. There's a lot of investment there too. So I think they really believe and would like for that offensive line to be one of the best offensive lines in the league. So I think that's going to be the identity. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers changes the whole perspective, and the whole team is going to revolve around him now, and just the benefits that come from having a quarterback of that caliber. But outside of him, it's going to be about a team that protects the quarterback and runs the football and gets after the other quarterback. I think that's who they want to be. And then you look at some of the commonalities between the picks they made this year that we talked about and have consistently held up throughout Joe Douglas's tenure. And I think the athleticism, the length, and the size, I think is something you're going to consistently see across this roster. Just really good traits. And I think being a good team in the trenches complements that. Like when you have good pass protection, speedy receivers can get the time to get open and make explosive plays. Speedy running backs can get the holes that they need to hit home runs. Then defensively, when you have a good pass rush, that's how lengthy corners like Sauce, athletic corners like Reed, and the athletic linebackers you have, it's how they can get the space in the room and the time they need to maximize those traits and make big game changing plays. So I think this is a team that wants to build through the trenches first and foremost, dominate the defensive and offensive lines, and then behind that, just have a bunch of lengthy, athletic guys who are profiting off of that work in the trenches to where they can maximize those special traits that they have. So that's what I think a Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh New York Jets football team is supposed to look like.
All right, draft grades are dumb, but I'm going to ask you regardless. What are you thinking about this class? I mean, I guess we should decide a specific criteria. How do we want to grade this? What constitutes a good draft grade for a pick? Because in night one we were talking about with Will McDonald, if he turns into Brian Burns, that's an A pick. But if we're going to look at it from what would we have said before the draft? What was who was the player that the Jets ideally wanted? Did they fill a need, etc.? So I think we gave it about a C. But again, draft grades are completely meaningless because I really like the player, and who cares? But looking at the class, how do we want to grade this? What's the criteria we're looking at?
I don't know, because I was actually thinking about this earlier, and because both of us, we grade graphs every year. I said grade graphs. Grade drafts. We should keep that in there. That's funny.
You got a Bina Conda, which I've already messed up like 8 times. It's going to be editing this podcast for 20 minutes, but grade graphs sunk you in the last 10 minutes of this podcast.
It took me a couple seconds to even realize I messed it up, but we're keeping that in there for transparency. But
we cut everything.
We
cut
both
every
do
mistake.
Exactly. But yeah, we both grade drafts every year. There we go. I nailed it. And everyone does it across the media, the fan base. But I was just thinking about it. Like, it doesn't make sense because I guess you can grade it based on your own opinions. Like, how did you rank the prospects? How do you like prospects? Just you as an individual, maybe you like this guy more than the consensus, less. But it doesn't really matter until they play. Like, you can't grade the value until they actually show you what are they giving you relative to the investment, because prior to that it's just based on maybe the consensus boards or what Daniel Jeremiah's board says, because a guy might be a value based on what Daniel Jeremiah thinks or what you think, but he still hasn't produced anything yet, and that's the only thing that matters. So I don't know. It's hard to really say what you should be grading upon. I mean, what do you
All
think?
right. It's kind of a bit of a stinker to end the podcast on, but I would agree with you. It is
We're gonna do it. I just
all
wanted to
right.
put my thoughts out there about how dumb it really is to do
All right.
draft
What
grades.
position? What needs do they address? Uh, what caliber athlete did they add to the team? I guess should we break it down to specific categories, and then should we really go galaxy brain about this, or should we just give it a letter grade like everybody else? I mean, we could break it down to the
That's a good way to
categories.
do it. We could break it down. Yeah, that
Okay,
makes sense.
we'll do this live. So score 5 out of these. What? How many categories you want to do? Let's say need, athleticism. What else? What other categories would you grade a pick by that you can actually judge?
Character,
Character feels like
scheme fit,
scheme fit for, and then
ceiling,
okay,
maybe floor, or could those be two separate ones?
I think
Like
okay, we can get rid of
their
athleticism
max
then.
potential and like
Okay,
their
fine.
likelihood of being a contributor.
So okay, that's 5. Okay, so then are we gonna grade every single pick by this? We're gonna be here for like
No,
15
no,
minutes
we're just
adding this
saying
up.
just as a whole.
Okay, just think of it. Okay, we're not gonna do the math on this. Just think of it by those. All right. Okay, fine. We'll go as a draft class. Scale 1 to 5, grade it. Did Joe Douglas fill the needs that you wanted him to fill this weekend? What would you give that?
Because look, if you told me before the draft they'd take an edge rusher first round, most of us wouldn't be fans of that. But again, it's like a need, whatever that Joe Douglas quote is, a luxury today could be a need tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Yep.
Edge is going to be a need next year, most likely. So,
How many
uh,
legitimate holes are still on this team, and which they might plug a
well, I think the
few.
O line, they really, even though they didn't get the round one tackle, I think you still look at the O line now versus pre draft and you're like, all right, I feel a lot better about that. So I do feel good about the O line.
Okay,
Running back was something that was questionable, and they addressed
feels
that.
good.
Linebacker, they did add some extra competition and talent there. Really, safety, I guess, is the one thing and defensive tackle they didn't really address. But again, it's like if there wasn't a spot in the draft where they thought it would be a major reach to take one of those positions, then you understand why they
You
didn't.
could say receiver as well, maybe if you're
Yeah, you
worried
could throw
about if
that
Garrett
in.
goes down. So what do you think?
I guess B
4 or
plus with
3?
needs. Oh, we're talking numbers.
Okay, fine. No, we'll do. You're right. Let's stick with the letters. That's
With
easier.
two letters. B plus.
Uh, yeah, I think B plus is fair in terms of getting after needs. What was the next one? Scheme fit.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
across the board, A.
I would say an A for scheme fit. There's nothing I really would complain about in terms of that. I think all these guys are, especially McDonald. I think
Yeah.
his stock was kind of hurt by playing at Iowa State. I don't know why you're putting a 239-pound guy at a defensive tackle for very high percentage of his snaps. So they kind of hung him out to dry. But with the Jets, they're gonna have him out in that wide nine, just pinning his ears back. It's gonna be a great fit. But across the board, I like these fits.
Character again. A lot of high
It's
character
another A
guys.
plus.
A lot of team captains. Uh, I guess ceiling. What's the ceiling of this draft class? I would also say pretty high. I mean, again, like this is where you get into are we just being homers here? Like, but I feel pretty good about this class. I don't want to give every category an A. The most important category is how they're actually going to play, but I would say character is an A, ceiling is an
Yeah, I
A.
guess I would say A for a ceiling.
Floor might
McDonald
be
really,
lower though.
I think McDonald really, yeah, maybe floor is a little bit lower. But yeah, I think McDonald kind of defines those because the ceiling with him is as high as it gets for an edge rusher, I think. But floor, you're definitely looking at, some risk there because of the run defense and the frame and some of those things. So there's definitely some downside. But then Tippmann, on the other hand, I think raises that floor. I think for a 43rd overall pick, he's as safe as you can get. So I guess I'd say A for ceiling, maybe A minus for floor.
All right, what other categories? Any other categories you want to throw in here?
Um, names. I like when
Names.
you draft players with cool names.
They had some cool names in this one. I guess that
So
has
you
to be an
got
A.
Abanikanda.
Abanikanda, you got a McDonald in there. You
Will
got
Mc, Will McDonald
Tippmann,
the fourth just looks like the name of a good edge rusher,
Kuntz,
doesn't it?
Kuntz, and
I feel like
Tippmann.
those Kuntz, Tippmann. These are some solid names. I would
Bernard
say A.
Converse. Yeah, I would go A on that.
That name's a little long. Is the only
Yeah.
problem.
All right. Is there any other categories that we could trade trade this graph class by?
Well, now you did it.
I know.
I'm not alone. Jersey number aesthetics. We got to know that the numbers first.
I want a Binakinda.
Definitely 0 for McDonald. I want to see.
I think I said a Binakinda. Jesus, I can't get it now. It's a Binakinda. Banakanda. Oh boy. A Banakanda. I will get it down. I want to see him in 23. I think that's a good number.
It's a good number.
I want Agent Zero for McDonald.
Jets legend Tevin Coleman.
Either Kuntz or Tippmann. Either Kuntz or Tippmann has to have 69. I would say Tippmann because I think Fabini was like his mentor, right? Didn't he wear 69?
Yeah. That makes sense.
I'm double checking. Yeah, he did wear 69. Okay. I'm trying to think about other numbers.
Some of the later guys, I don't really know. I want 0 for McDonald. 23 is a good idea for Banakanda. You could do 69 for Tippmann, or 65 was his high school number.
You know what I was shocked. We didn't touch on this enough, but the size of a Banakanda, because usually when you see a guy with that Olympic track speed, he doesn't come in a 215-pound build, and the combination of size and speed. So it's not just that he has that home run hitting ability, but as he gets his sea legs under him in the NFL, he's going to be able to run people over too. You are fucking terrible at picking up for where I leave you off. So, like if you trail off, I come in.
I wasn't looking at the video.
There was no video.
What? I said I wasn't looking at the video.
Were you listening?
I was kind of distracted because my charger popped out. Sorry.
You're editing this one.
With your 20 edits?
With my 20 edits, motherfucker, you fell asleep last night. It's 10:30 for both of us, and I have them all written down right here. I left my birthday party, and you were in a bad mood. Hey, you had one edit too. You had 2 edits actually, and this one 3. You have 3 edits. So it's right now I have a 7-3 lead on you. Okay, fine. All right, I guess we can wrap it up there. You can follow us at CYJPod on Twitter, myself at Ben W. Blessington, Michael at Michael_Nania. Go to JetsXFactor.com for the best place to go for Jets content. Please, if you can, rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. It helps out the pod a ton. Subscribe to the Jets X Factor YouTube channel. We post all the podcasts there. Tweet us, comment on the YouTube video. Let us know what you think. And tomorrow we will have a mailbag coming out. So tweet us your mailbag questions. We'll be making sure to answer all of them. A lot of questions can be spurned from this draft class. Looking at the rest of the roster, we didn't really touch much on receiver, and we haven't really touched too much about Rodgers since the trade has become official. So there's a lot to go over with this mailbag. So make sure to tweet us your questions. Michael, with that said, last thoughts?
Well, I think there's an important development going on that is very, very much needs to be discussed. But if you've been paying attention to some of the Jets press conferences recently, whether it was the Rodgers press conference, the draft press conferences, there's something that's been popping up a lot. A lot of classic Jets logos on T-shirts. Specifically, Joe Douglas, he had the plain logo at the Rodgers press conference, and then he had the 80s logo over these, I forget which day exactly, but he had the 80s logo on his T-shirt these past couple days. And then Hackett had a hat with the plain logo on it. So a lot of those classic logos.
You think they're gonna a retro? I think they got to bring a retro jersey back this year because the optimism for this season is higher than it's really been since 2011, probably. I would say. I mean, probably more honestly with Aaron Rodgers and just the playoff drought and everything. So you go bring back an 80s throwback uniform, and this fan base is going to lose their fucking mind. You know what I was thinking about this week? Is that first JETS chant, Rodgers debut season opener, when he gets announced out of the tunnel and the crowd is just going nuts, and we get the JETS chant going right at kickoff. I mean, that's just going to be for the
Yeah,
first time. I think MetLife is finally gonna we're finally gonna get to answer the question: would MetLife be how much better would MetLife be with a good team? You know, because we might hopefully we'll see a home playoff game. Maybe not. Maybe they are in a tough division, but regardless, you'll see plenty of big home games that you're hoping Jets fans are going to pack the seats for. So we should get a good atmosphere at games this year. So we'll finally get to answer the question. I know it probably is not going to live up to the heights of a giant stadium, but I think MetLife made some improvements this year. So with Rodgers, this fan base going crazy, some good football. I think you're gonna have a nice home field advantage. So,
I
um,
agree. I think like I have sympathy and understanding for Jets fans because of the product we've watched. I get why they haven't filled up the stadium, but I think when the stadium is filled, there is the potential for the Jets fans. Jets haven't given the fans reason to fill it up. And some other teams maybe are a little more consistent filling it up even when their team isn't good. But New York can be a little more expensive than some other stadiums in the league. So I understand why the Jets
right.
fans have been there. But this year,
Well,
fill that place up and let's make some noise. I'll
I
be
get
there
from
for
a
a few games. I know.
I get from a business perspective, they brought in Rodgers. The temptation might. I mean, I'm pretty sure they've already raised season tickets, but the temptation is going to be to jack up ticket prices. But if you want to have a nice home field advantage this season, you can't just price out all the fans and allow the Chiefs fans that move to New York City to go when the Jets play the Chiefs and that are willing to pay the higher ticket prices. I mean, look, Jets fans will shell out the bread to go to games, but look, you're going to make so much money on the jersey sales from Rogers. Let's just keep the tickets low enough that we can sell this thing out on a weekly basis. I don't think I've really ever seen a completely sold out MetLife Stadium. Be pretty hard to get to that. But can you imagine a sold out MetLife Stadium, a home playoff game like that? I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
I,
like I
I, I
said,
honestly can't even imagine that.
I
Like I
don't
can't
even
even
think I've
picture it.
seen completely filled. And even if it
The
was,
Super
it's
Bowl,
only
I think,
because
is
the
the
other
only time.
team. Yeah, and even if it was only because the other team was helping to fill it up. So it would be crazy because MetLife has as big of a capacity as any stadium. I think only
Yeah,
Dallas is ahead of them. So,
yeah.
and it is built in a good way to kind of, I guess not contain the sound because there's no roof, but it's just I think structured to
No, it
kind
doesn't
of
contain the sound because it's built with the grates with the design, so the
right.
sound escapes.
That's
That's
true,
part of the
but
problem with it.
it is a big capacity at
But I
least.
will
So
say MetLife looks a hell of a lot better at night than it does during the day. And because the Jets have sucked for the most of the duration of the stadium, we've just seen it Sunday 1 p.m. where it looks like a giant AC unit. But at night with the green lights, it looks like more of a Jets stadium, looks more modern. I don't know. It has a different feel at night. So these are
and
the
we'll see
things
a
that we
few of
think about.
those. At least two or three we'll get.
Yeah, I
Or
mean,
the home
apparently,
primetime games.
apparently the Jets going to have close to 6 primetime games. That will probably, I mean, the schedule release will be coming up in the next few weeks. We're gonna have a bunch of podcasts between then and now, but we'll make our schedule predictions. I did one last week when I was bored in anticipation for the draft, and I had 6 primetime games on that one. So we'll see. These are the things that we are now forced to talk about from now until training camp, now that the draft is concluded. But we will be having a mailbag tomorrow. We do have some things planned for this offseason. We will be consistent this summer. We have some interviews that we're lining up and want to do some film podcasts. There's some specific topics we want to dive into. I feel like that's the niche of this pod is when we can really take one topic and really dive into the nitty gritty of it. But really excited for the offseason upcoming. Just such an exciting time to be a Jets fan. I mean, I've been doing a podcast on the Jets since 2016. I have never had a season remotely close to the level of excitement that we are going to approach this year. So, and also I would imagine there's probably some new Jets fans. So maybe some new people checking out podcasts. It'll be a fun summer for Jets podcast. But stick with us tomorrow. Tweet us your questions. Let us know what you think. Everybody have a great evening. Go Jets.